Hi, I'm Casey Bell, and you're watching Writer to Writer Interviews. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Writer to Writers Interviews. My name is Casey Bell, your host, and today's guest is Liliane Grace from Australia, who is an author and a playwright. Let's take a listen at our interview together. So, tell me about when the writing bug bit you. I know you're an author and a playwright. So when was it when you started writing and you started realizing it was something you wanted to do?
I was probably 7 years old when I first filled an exercise book with imaginary stories. I was hooked. I loved reading, loved writing, from young.
Okay, so discuss right now the book you have coming up.
So the latest book?
Yes.
The latest book is this one. It's called Power of the Light. And it's about a boy whose father has cancer and how the family responds to the diagnosis. And along the way, the boy has a series of dreams that take him into a world where there's some kind of war going on, some kind of government control and a crushing of people. And this is why I decided to launch it now, because I wrote it in 2015. It was just sitting in my filing cabinet.
Oh, wow.
And then I thought, I'll launch it now because coronavirus 2020 is kind of relevant to this. I mean, cancer is really a true pandemic compared to the virus, which is now being downgraded to a flu. And this control of governments, this lockdown and all of that sort of stuff, there's a fairly sinister aspect to it, which ties in beautifully with that story, which is very much about taking emotional responsibility whether it's emotional or physical or mental, whatever, and not reacting to life experiences, but creatively choosing our response to them. So it's a story, it's fiction, with what I hope is an empowering message.
So you said you wrote it back in 2015. What was the original inspiration that told you to write that?
Well, you know what's interesting about that is it goes back a long time, back to 2000 or something, like a long time ago, when I was tutoring a boy in creative writing, and he was writing a story, a fantasy sort of story, and he was stuck. And I was sitting with him with this story and saying, well, we were looking at all of the options, magic or luck or, some force, brutality, whatever, like just these different ways of resolving the problem. And as I was talking to him, this little idea came to me, or by the power of the light. The light being an enlightened idea, like a different way of seeing things. And so that just sat at the back of my mind for years, and then I developed it into this story. And the other thing with that is that I'd had an idea for a novel called The Mastery Club. And I had this idea as well. And I had this kind of, which one will I write first? I ended up writing The Mastery Club first, and I published that one in 2006. And this one just kind of kept just sitting there on the shelf until The Perfect Storm 2020, and I went, right, let's get that book out and get it moving.
So then that would be an extra question I would ask you. Why, so you finished writing it and editing it in 2015. Did you say I'm waiting for the perfect time, or what was it that said don't publish it right away?
Just busy, had other work being published and marketed, and just didn't have the time, focus, energy to bring another book out. So I was focusing on the other work, because the Mastery Club also has a 10-week program that I was marketing and developing and all that sort of thing, which I was just too busy to bring another one out. And this particular book, I interviewed quite a few people who had cancer, who had recovered using holistic means. So there was that research component that was happening at the time I was writing it, to make sure that everything I said in the book was really useful, because my focus in the book is how to recover from cancer, not how to die gracefully, but how to recover, because it's so I did obviously do a bit more editing again before I brought it out, but it was basically written.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, you're also a playwright. So have you been able to see your work on the stage?
Yes. Just trying to think what was the first play. I've written a few plays, and they've all had their performances in amateur theatre. So one play that I wrote was called The Wash House Blues. And my kids, I was home educating my kids at one point, and this was a play I wrote for the home ed community. So it was for kind of primary age kids, and it's about a character called Miss Takes. And her tendency is to make mistakes. She's a bit of a, you know, a walking disaster zone. So the point of the story was, just, the message is, it's okay for him to make mistakes, just so long as you learn from them, you know. Mm. And so it's a comical little story about this girl getting a job and doing everything wrong, but it all ends up all right, you know. So that was that one. And I wrote a play called The Dream, and it was based on true experience. It was a friend of mine who died of cancer, so there's been a cancer theme happening, and I wanted to share what I felt was an X factor in her journey of where she did not nourish and look after herself. And I felt that was really important. So I put that out through that play. And I wrote a play called Unplugged, which is about being blocked creatively or blocked in any other way in your life. That was performed. So all those three have been performed. And then I've got another couple more recently written that have not yet been performed. So I've got one called The Big O, and it's about a fellow who's having a big O birthday, and his wife, who's kind of, she's ready to say, let's call it quits, but we'll just wait till after your birthday's over and then we'll call it quits, you know. And he lands a bit of a surprise message on her. The whole play takes place at his party, his Big O party, and he dumps something on her that takes her by surprise, which I won't divulge because that goes away. And the most recent one being a play for secondary school students called Design the Ideal World in 2000 Words. And this one, again, ties in with the zeitgeist, with the world we're experiencing right now. So it's about a girl, 14-year-old girl, who's been given this essay topic to design the ideal world. And she's got a 2,000 word limit for her topic. So at the beginning of the play, she's sitting there, you know, doodling and not sure what to write. And her parents and her aunt and uncle kind of arrive bringing pizza, and they're sitting there in the living room, and her mother says, you better go up to your bedroom because we're here now, you know. But she stays there, you know, and they engage in a conversation about the ideal world and the whole thing. And so the conversation kind of evolves from all the problems in the world today and how an ideal world would have none of this and none of that and none of the other, whatever. But they actually end up in a place where they think, well, actually the ideal world is the world we've got, because this is the world that gives us the opportunities that we need to grow and develop and, you know, become who we are. So yeah, those are the plays.
So the next question is a two-part question. Can you share first your publishing process of how you publish your first book and what you learned, because there really is no blueprint. And then also describe how you were able to get your plays produced. So first, for those who might be watching who want information on how to publish a book, and then you can tell us how your process and everything you learned through the process. Okay,
so with publishing the book, when I wrote The Mastery Club, I did initially send it to a large publisher, Hay House, because I felt they were very aligned. Now, they were not at the time publishing children's work, but which is what it was. It's sort of a child, young adult novel. But I'd heard that they were planning to. So my pitch was on the lines of, this could be a good novel to launch your youth, you know, for that,
right,
that list, that new list kind of thing. Anyway, it came back. I don't even think they read it. You know, it was just nothing. I tried another large publishing company and got the feedback that they didn't think that teenagers would be interested in it or would relate to it. So then I went to a couple of small publishers, and they said that they liked it. It wasn't a good enough match for their list, or they didn't think they would do it justice. So then I went to one of those publishing sort of partnership publishing companies. So this is where they will do everything from the vanity press kind of thing, where they'll just publish it for you and you just pay them a fee, right through to they will also invest in the project if they believe in it. So their response to the Mastery Club was that they would invest in it and we would do it together because they believed it had potential. However, when my husband and I at the time were like, we sat down and looked at what they were offering, and then we looked at each other and went, well, you can do that and I can do that and you can do that and I can do that, and we thought, let's do it ourselves. So he ended up doing all the technical side of the self-publishing process. I had a great book called Self-Publishing Made Simple by, I think, Ewan Mitchell or something. And that was our Bible. And I just did all of the marketing and the phone calls and all of that sort of stuff. And we made decisions together on the paper and the cover art. And my niece did the cover art for the original book. And so we self-published in 2006. And we had sold, and I couldn't get the distributor I wanted initially, but we had sold out of a 2,000 book print run in 6 months. And so, and then I did a 3,000 book print run and went back to that original publisher. And when I told them the results, they took me on straight away.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so, you know, it ended up winning an award for youth fiction and becoming an Australian bestseller in the sense, like it has sold over 12,000 books or whatever, where in Australia 3,000 to 5,000 is considered really good sales because we're a smaller market here. So that publisher who told me that she didn't think teenagers would relate to it, you know, not true. Like there's a heap of teenagers who wouldn't, who just are not ready for this kind of a book. But there certainly is a large number that can relate. So all right, so that's to answer your question about my first publishing experience. In relation to the plays, that's where I'm trying to think what happened first. But I think the Wash House Blues, the play about mistakes, I wrote that one and I produced it in our and directed it, whatever, in our little home ed community. So that's where it had its first run. Since then, it's been listed on a site for Australian plays, and I believe it has been published somewhere else, but I don't have any information about who purchased it and the rights to it and what they did. Then the play Unplugged, which was about the creative process, that one was produced for our, we've got an organisation called Writers Victoria over here, and they were having a cabaret night with various, you know, little writer related type of acts. So it's a one-woman play. So not me, I'm not the actor of it, but someone else acted it and I just directed, you know, and we put that one out. And The Dream, the play about the woman with cancer, that one was actually, I submitted it to a play writing competition and it was shortlisted. And then as one of the shortlisted plays, because it's short, it's a 20-minute play, they had an evening or a couple of evenings where they performed all of the shortlisted works. So it was performed there. And what was fascinating for me was that the woman who played the actress who played the character with cancer, which was inspired by my friend, had long red hair. And the woman who had been my friend who died had long red hair. Mm. That was almost spooky, you know. So that was really, really interesting. Yeah. Mm.
All right. So your last question. I don't know which one to give you, so I'm just going to give you both.
Okay.
If you can co-author a book with any author, dead or alive, who would it be? And then the second one, if you can co-write a play with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
That's a very interesting question. So I think if I were to go to, I'm going to have to answer it in a few ways. So first of all, I'm going to respond about the plays. There's an Australian playwright by the name of Hanny Rayson, and I love her work. I think she's a fabulous writer. I've met her, and I'd love to have the experience of working with her. Actually, another interesting answer to that, so I'm going to do two-part answers for both of those questions. So when I was about 17, I did a work experience when I went from school with Playbox Theatre Company here in Melbourne. And there was a young woman called Julianne O'Brien. She was only about 17 or something, or 18 or something. She was very young. And I was about the same age. And they were producing a play she had written which was about Antigone, the classic Greek, Antigone, but it was a very contemporary version of Antigone. And I was blown away, impressed with her writing, because she was my peer, and there she was being produced and performed. She was probably a year or two older than me, but it was very close. Anyway, so that's someone else that would be interesting to work with her. Then, as far as books are concerned, one of the authors who most inspires me is Marcus Zusak, who wrote The Book Thief. I don't know if you've read that, but that's just, the language in his book is so beautiful, and his characterizations, and it's just such a magnificent. So as far as a master of writing is concerned, it would be great to be in his aura, to learn from him and work with him from that point of view. But there's another part to that question, and that is because my niche is teaching through story. So I'm taking ideas that I find particularly inspiring and then wrapping them in story so that they're more palatable, that it's less of a lecture and it's more of a story. So there are a few people that I have worked with, or I've learnt from, whose ideas are really brilliant, that it would be great to work with them where I'm the right content in the creative thing. So if I could co-write with someone, so I'd pick someone like Dr. John DiMartini, or one of these people who really interest me, where we could take some of their content and I would have the pleasure and the fun of putting it out through story. But I'd have them as a resource to check on the message and make sure it's really sound, that I'm representing them properly. So working with one of those kinds of people would be fabulous as well. There you go. Done.
Don't go anywhere. We will be back right after this message. When his father is diagnosed with cancer, Nathan escapes into a fantasy world through his dreams. But even there, trouble is brewing as a growing breed of reactors attempt to control people's minds. Power of the Light by Liliane Grace. For more information, go to LilianeGrace.com.
Now, look, it probably, maybe it seems a little tedious, but I've got to start with the same questions because I want to also know those sorts of things. Like, what was your genesis with writing? Have you been writing since you were young, and what did you begin with? Was it plays or something else?
So my earliest memory of writing is actually songs. I think 6 or 7 years old is when I first started writing weird stuff just for the sake of it. And I also remember, what was it, second or third grade writing a song. I didn't let her hear it because I didn't have the guts, but I had a crush on this girl. So I wrote a song about her. And then from there, I've basically been writing my whole life, like silly things. Like I wrote my own talk show. I wrote commercials for the show in between. I would write, because I liked cooking, so I would write my own cooking show. So definitely from the age of 6 on up, I've always been writing something creatively.
Wow. I wonder, so because I can relate to the 6 as well, so, or the 7-year-old as well. So I wonder if that's the mark of, someone whose soul is a writer, when you come in really young with that calling to express yourself like that. So in relation to your play, the Rainbow play that you were telling me about, with the day that the rainbow broke up, is that?
Yeah, the day the rainbow broke up.
Yeah. So clearly it's got some important messages about diversity and relationships and things like that, and the importance of those things. But what was the genesis of that play? Where did that idea come from for you?
So I have a whole bunch of different emails because I'm a little OCD. And one of the emails, mail.com, when you log out, they show you the latest news. And so I logged out, and I don't remember the exact storyline, but it said some boy did something racist against another black boy in school of such and such. And immediately I said, I don't understand humans. I'm like, and I talking to myself, could you imagine if the rainbow was racist against each other, the colors of the rainbow? Could you imagine if they broke up because they didn't like each other? And I just stopped and I went, that's a play. And like, it just immediately, and I wasn't even looking to write that day. I was just frustrated how humans have a problem with diversity when, plants, insects, and animals are all diverse. The whole world is diverse. The earth is diverse. There's nothing the same. I mean, birds alone. I mean, there's penguins that don't fly with no feathers. You have eagles that fly the highest, and then you have some birds with feathers but don't fly. There's a kiwi bird that only has fur, and I mean, it's just everything is diverse, and no one ever says there's something wrong with a black cat and a white cat. But yet with humans, we have a problem.
Yeah.
So I was just frustrated, and I was just venting to myself, and immediately I went, "That's a play." And the funny thing about it is, I used to like when I told people I do theater, they're like, "Oh, you should write children's theater because children's theater always need it." And I'd always tell them, well, I don't do children's theater. That's not my forte. So immediately I was like, oh, this is a children's theater too. So it took me maybe 2 or 3 days to really sit down and map out, because the play has 7 actors and each actor plays 2 roles. So I had to map out enough time for them to change costumes. And then once I did that, I decided what rainbow color was going to be which part of the whatever. Once I mapped it out, it took me maybe a day or 2 just to write it out and complete it. And that was the birth of it. It wasn't even something I was thinking to do. It just happened.
Yeah, lovely. Those are the best, aren't they? When it just flows through.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to ask you also about or bringing your work out into the world and being published and performed and recognized, because I think for a writer it's like we're a cook, and you put your time and energy into making a beautiful dinner party, a meal, but if no one shows up to eat it, it just doesn't, that's
Right.
not as satisfying to sit there and eat it all yourself. You want to be able to share it with someone. And the same with writing, is that we get our joy partly from writing and partly from the sharing and the response. So what's been your journey with being published and getting it out there?
Well, the writing was, so in 2003 was the first time I actually started writing a book, but that book wasn't actually published till like 2015, I think. But in that moment when I started writing it, I said to myself, no one's going to publish this. I'm not that good of a writer, yada, yada, yada. This is not going to be published. But I started writing it anyways. And then in 2007, was it 2006, I think, actually, someone from my church, she brought in her friend, and we had a how to publish your book conference, class, workshop, whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'm going. And I just wrote down all my notes, whatever. And then that was a Sunday. That Monday, I was like, okay, am I gonna do this, or I'm gonna be scared and not do it? And I remember actually in 2007, I wrote my first book. Well, I finished my first and published my first book, The Diary of Stephanie Dane. And that was 100% faith, because in my mind, I'm like, this is horrible. No one's gonna want to read it, And I said, but this is my only option right now. I can because I've sent out once or twice to publishing companies, and one of them said, you write okay and your storyline is good, but you do need more work, more practice, blah, 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 blah. And they sent me information on classes they offer, and I didn't have the money to take it. So at this moment, I'm like, I don't think even if I pay money for a literary agent, I'm clearly going to have to pay first lots of money for an editor to rewrite my work. So it is good enough for a literary agent. That's good enough. So I just said, you know what, I'm just going to try this. And so I took the steps that I got from this workshop on how to publish. At that time, I was using 48 hours books. I think that's what it is.com. And also there was another one, which their website didn't go out of business, but they kind of went out of business because the owner passed away. But then from there, each year, you know, I'm sure you know by now, new stuff is arriving for self-publishing. So I just kept researching and researching and researching. And so that's how I got my books published, self-publishing, through that workshop, thankfully. My plays, I've only had one of my plays produced. I've submitted countless theater companies, festivals, competitions. I either got ignored or rejected. And so the day the Rainbow broke up, I thought for sure everyone would want to produce that. But again, in the beginning, I got rejections and ignored. And finally, this one public theater company where I live, well, not where I live, but in state that I live in, New Jersey, contacted me and said, yes, we really want to do it. And originally they were asking me to do it. What was it? It was 2016. They were asking me to do it for 2018. And I said, sure, not a problem. They then said, because they always have a children's theater show in January or February. Then they said, well, the show we have prepared is not working out. So do you mind if we do yours? And so I said, of course. And so in 2017, they produced it. They did an amazing job. And then in 2018, they asked me to do it again in 2019. And so that was the only one that I got produced. I've never had the resources to actually produce myself, although I have tried many times. Things just didn't work out, even looking for rehearsal space and things of that nature. It just seemed like I would contact people and I wouldn't get responses. And I would just be like, ugh. So yeah, and then I also produced it on YouTube for, play reading during the pandemic. But yeah, that's been my process.
Mm-hmm. Mm. It's a very challenging journey to be a creative, isn't it? You know, unless we've got some big money behind us. And because traditionally the writer was just the writer, they were just the creative, and they did outsource everything else to a marketing team and an editing team and a sales team and all the rest of it. And these days, if we're self-publishing, we're doing the whole lot ourselves. We're wearing so many different hats.
Yes.
Hence why that novel waited for so many years, because I was just juggling, you know, like a million balls in the air at once all the time. All right, so let me ask you a question that I know is difficult to answer, and that is, so I'm not going to ask you which is your favorite of all your works, because I know for me as a writer, all of my works are like my children. You don't have favorite children. You love them all. You know, they all have a different face and a different energy and all the rest of it. So not which necessarily, unless you have one, but is there one that comes to the fore that for you as being a favorite project that you've worked on or something? Would it be the Rainbow play, or is it something else, and what makes it so important to you?
As you said, I don't have favorites, but I will say, as far as plays go, the only reason why I would say right now, even though it's the Rainbow play, only because it's the only one I've seen on stage. All my other plays, I have yet to see them. Although I will say, if I had to choose a favorite play, it would actually be the Love, which is a children's musical that I have not been able to produce yet because I haven't been able to find a composer for the songs that I wrote for it. Mm-hmm. As far as my books, I always say the same thing. The reason why my favorite book is, I have a book called Essays from Dysfunctional Families, Literary Betrayal. It's basically 2 books in one. So the first book is Essays from Dysfunctional Families, which is written by a fictional author who uses his family and friends' secrets to write a best-selling book. And even though he doesn't tell names or anything, he exaggerates and fictionalizes it. When his family reads it, they realize what he did. And so the second book, Literary Betrayal, is his family and friends' reaction to him producing this book. And that idea came to me because I had the idea of actually doing that. And a part of me was, in my mind, I was like, they're never going to read the book anyways. My family and friends are never going to read the book anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I always had that, but what if? and what if they know what you're doing, and yada, yada, yada. So I actually, when I asked myself, well, what happens if they do read it and find out what you did and they're angry with you, what would you do? And
Yeah.
immediately I had an image in my head of me going to like a Thanksgiving dinner and everyone making sarcastic, sly remarks, not really talking about what I did, but not happy that I'm there because of what I did. And so I said, well, I won't actually do it, but maybe I'll write about someone who did do it. And so that's where the idea came from.
Right.
And so I
The safety and pleasure of exploring an experience we'd like to have, but without actually having to do it. Oh, great. Yeah, good idea. Oh, okay. Isn't this the most wonderful thing, being a writer, having this, the joy of creation? It's just such a wonderful, wonderful thing. Yeah.
It is. I enjoy it very much.
Well, I've lost track of how many questions. I think there were 5 there, but
okay.
I'm not sure. It might be. Let me just ask you one last one, perhaps, and that is, when you talked about your early journey with books and writing, talkback shows, and like there was a huge range. So, are you still writing in quite a range of genres, or have you focused in?
No, I have not focused in.
Yeah.
You still,
great.
Yeah, I used to think it was like ADHD. Maybe I had an issue. Maybe I had a problem. But for me, I think for me the reason why it is because I grew up in diversity. I think that's the reason why I never had a problem like with hatred and all that, because my mom's side of the family, we have white, Blacks, Asian, and Hispanic in the family. A lot of my cousins are, bi-ethnic. And then I grew up in a church where the pastor was white. And then I went to a school with a whole bunch of different people. And then I was able to listen to, like, even though it was mostly gospel, I would still listen to like the old, like 1960s Motown, things like that sort. And I would still listen to the stuff that was up to date. And anytime I would watch a film that took place in the 1920s or 30s or 40s, and they would use music from that, I would always enjoy it. So I was never in a place, and both my parents supported me in everything I did, and they never said anything about you have to do one thing and one thing only. So I never grew up with this whole idea of you have to stick to one thing and stick to it and never change. And it's just what I've always done. So when I come up with an idea, I don't stop and say, oh, I can't do that because I only do children's. So I can't do that because I only do this. Oh, I can't do that because, once I come up with an idea, I find the genre for it and then I put it in that genre. But I don't stop myself because I'm not, in that genre.
I love that answer, Casey, and I'm the same. I like to, children's picture books, plays, a musical is my next plan. I've written a song, I've written novels, I've written nonfiction blogs, all the thing. And I was at a literary pitching event a couple of years ago, and I'd submitted a novel, and I was having a one-on-one with an agent, because he had this kind of 3-minute pitch, opportunity. And when I indicated that I had a range of other projects, she looked down her nose at me very disapprovingly, because, if I was a true emerging writer, I should be just focused on one genre. And I just thought, that's so wrong. I mean, if we think about the Renaissance man or whatever, like the number of people who have this range, this diversity of, these rainbow colors to them in terms of all the and I think it just enhances our skills and our perspective and all the rest of it. So I agree with you. I like your answer.
Thanks.
We're aligned on all of it, I think.
Essays from Dysfunctional Families, a book written by Dean K. Brent exposing his family's and friends' secrets. Literary Betrayal is his family's and friends' reactions. 2 books in 1, uniquely written by author Casey Bell. Available now. Thank you for watching. I would like to thank my guest Liliane Grace, and I want to thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Have a great day. Are you a guest looking for a host to interview you? Or are you a host looking for guests to interview? Radio Guest List is the website for you. It's a free listing of guests looking for shows to interview them, as well as a free listing of shows looking for guests. Whether you're looking for a guest to interview or shows to interview you, go to radioguestlist.com.